Hi everyone, welcome back to SmugMug Live. Thank you so much for joining us today wherever you are in the world. You're very welcome here to what is episode 62 and the very last one of the year. I can't believe we've done 62 episodes this year for something that was just meant to be a little show that we put together during lockdown. Here we are at the end of the year still going, and I'm really glad you're enjoying these shows. These shows, as always, are brought to you by SmugMug and Flickr. If you're looking for somewhere to showcase your images, store your images, or have an e-commerce solution, check out everything we have to offer at smugmug.com. And if you're looking to be part of an incredible photo community, then check out everything we have to offer at flickr.com. As always, with the show, it's always great to see who's joining us today. So get in that chat window, give yourself a little shout out, tell us what part of the world you're joining us from. And of course, we would love it if you would hit that subscribe button, hit that little bell notification. That way you'll be notified about any show that we have coming up here in the future on SmugMug Live. In 2021, we'll have more shows coming after the new year. I'm really looking forward to today's show. I'm joined by a couple of really fun guests, and we have a bit of an international spread about the show today, which I'll explain in the moment. But if you have any questions for today's guests, then post those questions in the chat window. Post the word question, then put your question. That way I can find it in the chat window. Give yourself a shout out, ask questions. The more questions you ask, the more fun the show will be today. But for the moment, let's say hello to our guests. So I'd really like to welcome Ben and Sebastiaan from Lux Optics, the incredible team behind one of our favorite photo apps on iOS, Halide. Hi guys, how are you?
Hey, thanks for having us.
Hey, it's great to be here.
Hey, Sebastiaan. Hi, Ben. It is great to see both of you. I said it as a bit of an international flavour at the moment because I'm in Scotland. Ben, you're in the Bay Area still, I believe?
Yep, I'm in San Mateo, California, just outside of SF.
Yeah. And Sebastiaan, where are you at the moment?
I'm actually in Amsterdam, and I got there today. So usually I live in San Francisco, but I just was one of the very few people flying at this time to go join my family a little bit after the holidays once I'm done quarantining.
Yeah, so you are literally just off a plane into Amsterdam in the Netherlands, right?
I got off a plane 11 hours ago, so yep.
Well,
relatively right off the plane.
We'll do our best to keep you awake while you're jet lagged and stuff. Ben, how are you doing? Are you doing okay there in the Bay Area? You're not jet lagged.
No, and no shoveling snow, so I don't really have much to complain about out here.
So I said in the introduction that you are part of the team behind Halide, one of certainly my favorite camera app, and a lot of the team here at SmugMug and Flickr are huge fans of Halide. But Halide Mark II at the moment, is that right?
Yep, that's it.
So tell us a little bit about how you got started making camera apps.
Well, it's a good story. We both have kind of a version of the story, which is kind of cool because we were just independent aficionados of both Apple and iPhones and photography. And then one day, I think we both were frustrated with the state of the art when it comes to photography. But it was really Ben that started this whole thing and got us into where we are now. So Ben, you want to talk about how this all got started?
So it's pretty funny. I had just been working at a large tech company and doing a lot of consumer-facing, typical iPhone apps. And I wanted to, after leaving that company, sort of figure out what I want to do next. And it wanted to be nothing social, nothing, turning JSON into screens. And so I was getting into more computer graphics, and I was really interested in photography. So I looked at the different apps that were out there, and I noticed that they, all seemed to lack certain features that you'd get out of a digital SLR at the time, like focus peaking. And so there's sort of a checklist of technical things that were somehow missing, which didn't seem impossible to build. And I had been shooting more iPhone photography, and it sort of felt like, okay, why don't I try building an app? and it could be a calling card. So if I end up doing like consulting or whatever, hey, I can show this iPhone app I built as a demo of some of the, what I'm capable of. And so, I got to a point technically where it's like, okay, I've got focus peaking, I've got the histogram, which is in real time, and I checked off all those boxes, and it felt like cool. Now I just have to spend about 30 years becoming an expert graphic designer. I started, looking out at my network of like, well, who should I partner with? They could complement on the design side what I'm feeling on the tech side. And at the time, Sebastiaan had just written a 2-year review of the Leica M8 or M9, and it was a super, super detailed review about like his adventures motorcycling with it and everything. It's like, okay, he is clearly passionate about photography in the same way as me. And it just so happened we were both in SF at the time, and so and we were mutuals on Twitter. So I shot him a DM. Hey, you want to grab some coffee? I got an idea, and sort of the rest is history. Very compressed history from there. So it wasn't like the next week, but yeah, that's how it sort of started.
That's how it all got together. We're delighted that you both did get together and build this app. An app as I say, we've been loving here and using for a while. When was the first version launched? Can you even remember?
A week before WWDC 2017. And I think we'd been working on the app off and on for a year. And so, we had other obligations at the time. We were still doing freelancing and such. And I believe we'd set a line in the sand, like, okay, we really got to get this out. Let's just say a week before Dub, and we'll just see what the reaction is. And yeah, so I think May 2017.
Yeah, and it's important to note that we, at this point, it's not like this was the thing we were focusing on. It was really just the little side project we were doing. Like we had our day jobs. I was free full-time designing, and Ben was like doing his own thing full-time. So I think we were just really excited about the project still, but we had obviously, not given it our full and undivided attention, and we really wanted to finish it. And we finished it with the idea of, this is something to scratch our itch, right? Like nothing out there really did it for us as far as the camera app goes. So this would be, hey, if whatever, 25 people downloaded the app, great.
Well, yeah, we've been building it really in a vacuum. We'd shown it to some friends, but we had absolutely no idea, like when you get it to a wider audience, like, does this make any sense? Is there any kind of people who'd want to use this? Who knows? And so you have to kind of say what is good enough that you can actually start collecting feedback and see if you're onto something.
I'm sure lots of people were happy to give you feedback. That's for sure. As soon as you have an app, you definitely get feedback. We know that for sure. This year especially has been a busy year for the Halide app. There's been quite a few features launched, and obviously the most latest thing is ProRAW, launched by Apple in the new iOS 14 operating system update, and with the new version 12s of their iPhone. So we're going to talk a little bit about ProRAW and how that's going to change the kind of landscape of how people think of RAW and utilize RAW, and then we'll also talk about how you've incorporated it into your app. But you launched quite a big feature change earlier this year, is that right? Before even ProRAW came around. Sebastiaan, you want to tell us about that?
Yeah, it was. So to kind of give an insight into what our year usually looks like, this is usually, as far as like our work on new features goes, is kind of the quiet time. The busiest time for us, and some people think that now that we have like, we're fairly well known as an app, that we get advanced access to like new iPhones or something. That's not the case. So for us, it's always a scramble come iPhone season. And iPhone season is September. That's when Apple usually gives us new iPhones. They come out and we have to immediately buy them, have them in our hand to try and see if it, for one, breaks anything, and for two, to support the latest and greatest things. Because one of the big things that change every year to entice people to buy the latest and greatest is obviously the camera. You can see that in like the iPhone 12 Pro Max this year has like a physically bigger camera, and everybody was very interested to see what kind of a difference that made. Before that, it was adding an ultra wide angle lens. So as a camera app, we also have to be on that. This year, we also, after having been on the App Store for a few years, wanted to basically make our big version 2.0. And that pretty much coincided. We hope to finish it. This is how it goes with these kind of projects. It's a really ambitious project, so the date slept a little further. But at some point, we're like, okay, we have to get this out before the new iPhones. And it came out, Ben? A few days before the new iPhones came out?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure 48 hours.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, the original plan date and when we finally shipped, it all came together as if we had a really good plan, and it worked out though. Yeah,
it worked out. Yeah, and so that was a really big update. So it was so big that, and I like to treat the app itself like we call it a camera app, and it's an app, of course, but because you take photos with it, we see it as a camera, and we try to make its experience much like actually using a camera. The first time you use it, you see a little manual and pages, and we use a custom typeface that makes it kind of look like a real camera. So why not call version 2 Mark II, which is a big thing in camera land. So we called it Halide Mark II, and with Mark II came a new interface and tons of new features, and it was a really big update for us. And after that, of course, new iPhones came, and a little bit after that, fortunately for us, ProRAW didn't come out immediately with the new iPhones. It came out a little bit after that with this software update that came out, I guess, last week.
Yeah, lots happening. Well, you definitely made the launch look seamless and timed to perfection, if I can say that. Whether that was just the aligning of all the moons, Saturn and all that, all lined up perfectly for you. So yeah, it looked really good timing, and I love the app. I wonder if before we get to the raw discussion, we can have a little look at some of the things I love so much about Halide. I think the best way to do that is that rather than have you folks stream over hotel Wi-Fi to try and share your phone, I'm going to share it on my side. And hope that the demo gods play kindly to us. So first caveat I have to say is Santa hasn't brought me my iPhone 12 yet, so I'm not going to be able to demonstrate the ProRAW stuff, but we can have a chat about that, and you can highlight some of that. But if I open Halide, you're going to see a lovely screenshot of my desk at the moment from the app. So it's a fairly obvious camera app, but there's a couple of things that, can I just tell you a couple of things that I really love about it, and then you can kind of chime in with your things. This autofocus feature is super nice, where you just slide the autofocus back and forward to get your focus point. But the tools that you've added to that to help us make sure it's in focus, I just love some of them. The focus loop that lets you zoom in on something so that when you focus, you can really make sure it's sharp. But you've done something really clever with several things where you have made them automatic, so that just now when I'm not focusing, it's not there. But then if I do focus, it pops up. Very clever, gentlemen. I do really like the fact that you made that get out the way when I don't need it. But I'm actually a big fan of the focus peaking for when it comes to focusing. And you did the same with that. If I tap it again, I get auto focus peaking, which means the focus peaking disappears when I don't need it. When I stop focusing, it disappears. As soon as I refocus, it's great. Slide up and down on the left to get my exposure. Sorry, my right to get the exposure. A couple of just very, very simple features, but superbly executed. And I was telling Ben, I'm a huge fan of your, well, what do you call it? It's the alignment tool, or, as soon as something is level, I get this haptic feedback. Love the haptic feedback, and then you get that green square around the center. What do you call that feature internally?
I think it's the level.
Just level?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't even know. It's probably something funny in the code itself.
Yeah.
It's just like the alignment thingy.
Yeah, the level. It's just lovely to have a really nice haptic feedback to that. And then obviously you have been able to turn all the the alignment grid and all those type of things. But the way that you've built focusing into this with the autofocusing and with those ways, the loop and the peaking, just really, really awesome. Some of the killer features for me out with the kind of raw capabilities. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
It's funny. So you're mentioning with the focus kicking in when you actually press your finger down. A lot of our ideas are obviously inspired by something else. There's no such thing. There's nothing new under the sun, right?
Right.
And so that feature is actually based on traditional, some digital SLRs, or actually mirrorless ones. If you start adjusting the focus ring, I don't know if the Sony does this, but it will kick in focus peaker and whatever focus aid is. So, what was interesting and what people underestimate about mobile devices is we can actually hook into when your finger touches down, because what's annoying is on these traditional digital SLRs, you have to change focus before the aid kicks in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, okay, now I got to ruin my focus in order to actually adjust my focus, right? So, because we're working with a touch screen, we're like, okay, the natural next level of this is you put your finger down and it just kicks in even without you having to move your finger around, right? So, I think that we wouldn't pretend that we're like design geniuses, like that, like we sit in a lab in a pure white room and we come up with the ideas. Often we, take a bunch of traditional cameras and we look at the features and we say, okay, well, what would be like the evolution of this, or, what would be a riff on this? And sometimes we do come up with new stuff, but, we aren't as original as we pretend.
Well, the execution of it is really good. To someone who's used many camera apps, it's definitely my go-to. And then the big thing that set you apart from many was the ability to capture RAW. So tell us about how that came about. Even before ProRAW, you were able to take a DNG file with Halide. What set you down that path of wanting to give people more than just a JPEG?
I think we were just in the right place at the right time. It turned out, I think iOS 10 is when they announced RAW was coming to iPhone. So previously they only supported processed formats like JPEG. And so I think that was just one of the signs of we had already been thinking about making a camera app. And it was around that announcement time. There's okay, now the phone can actually compete with a digital SLR. And so even without the more advanced sensors now, I guess with computational photography, the gap is closing a bit more, but there was such a huge hurdle, or huge difference between RAW results and JPEGs when it was first announced. So Apple, their API outputs DNGs. So we didn't have to build any of the, plumbing to do any of that, but really there were nuances in wiring it up. We could write a book about all the little edge cases and surprises you get, and we could fill a book with all the bug reports over 3 years of seeing this in the wild. But yeah, so it was a lot of it. We owe to Apple for actually putting the APIs in around the time of the iPhone 6S. So,
yeah, and Ben touches on a really interesting thing there when he says that around the time this came out, there started to become this big gap on the iPhone with what your out-of-camera JPEG looked like and your RAW file looked like. So in the beginning, it wasn't super different. And then around the iPhone 10, especially the iPhone 10s and 10R, people started using our app and saying, what is happening to my RAW file? And what was happening is that the JPEG pipeline, so the image you take with the built-in camera app, was really smart, and it got smarter a lot faster. And the RAW file was really just that single exposure RAW, when the JPEG became this multi-exposure fusion. So as photographers, we know, bracketing HDRs, and we have to fuse together photos. For those that don't know, there's a setting on a lot of pro cameras that take 3 photos at different exposure levels, and then you can combine them for getting detail in the shadows and detail in the highlights. Your iPhone nowadays does all that in a single photo whenever you take a photo. That made that people's JPEGs obviously had a lot of lighter shadows, and a lot of the skies and details that would normally be blown out or too bright would be recovered. And because that was so intensely and very smartly and well engineered in this pipeline, and the RAW didn't get that, people increasingly started to come to us saying, why do my raw files look so bad? They didn't really. They actually just needed to be edited, but it wasn't quite as... there's a difference between the way your JPEG looks out of your digital SLR and your raw file, but it's not as dramatic as it was in the iPhone for a while. And so what we really were doing for the last few years was trying to both bridge that gap and build logic to expose the raw file in a way that was a little bit different than how you would normally expose a JPEG with all that smart stuff going on, because that way we could keep the noise down a little bit and play to the strengths of the raw file, which was, if you had the time and the know-how to edit it, you could still get better shots with the raw file. It would still be a little sharper because there wouldn't be all that computational stuff applied to it.
So that's interesting. So something that, a journey that many of us who photographed DSLRs, a journey that we went on, many, many years ago when we, were taking JPEGs and taking RAWs, and we were seeing the JPEG on the back of our camera, and then we were getting the raw file and saying, wow, what's happened? This looks terrible. That journey's now happened very recently on mobile devices, where people are now saying, wow, I can take a RAW, but it looks crap. But the JPEG looks so good. And, we've done that with DSLRs, but what you're saying is because of the incredible computational photography that was going on, the JPEG was looking so good that gap was even wider. People were even more shocked at how their raw files were looking on their mobile, or they were taken on their mobile devices. But do you think you were also capturing an audience who just had never photographed RAW before?
Definitely. Yeah. There was a lot of users that assumed that RAW just meant better photo, higher quality. Obviously, if you say RAW is just more data, it is a higher quality format, which technically that's true. A lot of people, because the barrier to entry is much lower. It's not like you have to buy a $700 camera. Our app was a few bucks. A lot of people used Halide to explore photography for the first time, and definitely in a way raw capture, because we default to JPEG plus raw capture. So a lot of people are like, oh, what's this? Raw files, let's try it. And we're then shocked to find that they were all noisy, because one of the things that is one of those smart things your phone does is noise reduction. Small sensor, small lens, lots of noise. So it has to do a lot of noise reduction. Raw file, barely to no noise reduction. So you have noisy files, especially in the dark. And people were like, whoa, what's all this noise? And we would just say, well, that's how your camera sees it.
Yeah. Also, I think there's a bunch of issues in the overall ecosystem with third-party apps consuming raw files, which was throwing a ton of people for a loop. Like Instagram, which is ostensibly a photo app, doesn't actually load raw files. If you by default just hand it a system raw, it will load the low resolution, like 1/4 resolution image. So and it's the built-in thumbnail, which is meant just for previewing. So people would load it into Instagram, be like, this is fuzzy and this is like garbage. Like, why am I using this app? And it's like, well, you're not editing the raw. You're not even using an unedited raw. You're using just like some garbage postage stamp sized image, right? So part of what we've been doing is, in addition to educating users, having more graceful fallback scenarios there so that it at least, loads the system JPEG. A lot of raw apps will by default expose the raw completely incorrectly. They'll just like choose wacky defaults. And so, I mean, that, segues into one of our top priorities when we built Mark II was we call it instant raw. So basically you tap one button and we give you an 80% developed image, which alone coming from a system JPEG, you'll notice is sharper and has more detail. And then, from there, it's easier if you do need to have to go to JPEG and edit it in your app that doesn't support RAW, you're at least close enough that it won't turn to mush later, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So in Halide 2, you can take JPEG, you can turn off RAW, right? You can have RAW Plus, which is the RAW plus a JPEG, correct? And then you also have Instant RAW, which you just mentioned, that does some of that processing for you. Is that how Instant works?
It's definitely, you press a button and we just try to develop it for you. Using some intelligent heuristics. We don't promise to users that it's going to be a magic button that will make perfect photos today. We
Working on it.
It's really, yeah, exactly. So you press a button and it will get you 80% of the way there, so that you have something quality. And sometimes people just post instant raw photos right out of Halide, and they're super happy with the results. But yeah, it's an added process inside the photo gallery to develop your photos for you. Close enough.
Close enough. So then iOS 14 comes along, and we now have ProRAW, which is Apple's new RAW format, which I know, Ben, you've been busy over the last few weeks creating some incredible blog posts and kind of giving us some real insight into what that format means. It's a kind of modified DNG format, is that correct?
So it's actually based on this little known version of DNG. So usually when you have a DNG, it is the actual sensor values, right? It is the Bayard red, green, and blue values. Well, there's also a variant of DNG that's inside the spec called linear DNG. And it has been used before. I think like Lightroom, when you do an HDR fusion, I think that there is an option to output a linear DNG. And you could think of it in that case as like a super TIFF, where it's lossless. I think it might still be display referred, but it's like a lossless format for images. But in the case of a linear DNG, it just skips over the debayering in the case of ProRAW. So it still has, 95% of the value of an original DNG you'd output from a camera, but it gets rid of all of these, there's performance reasons that it's better. There's compression things they can do, which are interesting. You can save space on the image by recording at a lower bit depth. So even though it isn't a true RAW, you can apply your computational photography that would normally take a number of exposures and you have to merge it afterwards and bake it into this image. There's just so many compelling features that it's worth for many people throwing out the Bayard raw sensor data just to skip that one step for all these other awesome things. But it is still ultimately a DNG. Even before Adobe issued their update to Lightroom, I don't know if it's out yet, to support the new tags that Apple inserted, you could just import it into a 5-year-old version of Lightroom. I think I don't have one lying around, but you should be able to import it into a 5-year-old version of Lightroom or anything that reads a DNG according to spec, and it will still just work. So there's no ecosystem problems or anything like that. And Apple, by the way, this is one of the few times Apple was given an opportunity to invent something very Apple-y and unique to Apple. And they're like, nope, we're just going to stick to, an open standard. So they really did right by the users. So there's nothing locking you into the Apple ecosystem when you shoot ProRAW.
Yeah, I think that's what a lot of the excitement is about. The fact that, Apple have used this open standard that is then merged with all the other clever stuff they're doing, all the computational side of stuff, and it's really taking RAW to another step. This place where we have almost the best of both worlds, right? We have a raw image, but also the power of the camera and the computational maths layered on top of that to do some really cool things. And do you think this is where suddenly there's going to be this mind shift to RAW being for everybody rather than just for quote unquote the pro photographer space? Do you think this is where it really opens it up to the masses?
I think that's the other reason that Apple did what they did. It's adding working with Adobe to add new tags to RAW. So as we were talking about before with development, that was the main barrier for most casual photographers is you have to know how to adjust the shadow slider, exposure, white balancing, everything like that. So basically, if you load today a ProRAW in Apple's Photos app, it just looks identical to the computational photography that you get out of a JPEG. So I think that it will absolutely open the door for people shooting RAW, even though they don't understand all the implications. I mean, the only trade-off is once they realize the file size, hopefully they're paying for the 2 terabyte iCloud. So that's the only thing that Apple cannot solve is the file size. But I think that it will open the door for people who they just take a photo and they think something's underexposed. They just slide one dial, and it's like literally like night and day. The recovery just in shadows alone. What you can do with white balancing, like it's going to feel for a lot of users like magic, but unlike a traditional RAW, you didn't need to go to a wizard school to use it. So, I think that it's going to introduce a bunch of people to RAW photography.
Yeah. So let's talk about the elephant in the room, the file size, which is what do we reckon? I think you said 25 meg for ProRAW file?
I've seen it go as high as 40. So it varies per file. It's big. Consider, just to add a frame of reference, I think a normal iPhone photo can be between like 1 to maybe 2 megabytes. So you're looking at least 10 times the storage space required for your iPhone photo. With the caveat, sometimes if you have like a live photo, the movie component of that could take a little bit of extra space. RAW files are, Ben, do you remember what like regular RAW files come in at?
Usually they're about 12-ish megabytes each.
About a megabyte per megapixel, basically. Yeah. So they're big. ProRAW files are large.
Well, you can do so much with them. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we didn't get into it in the blog post because of space. So here's some extra info. But part of the reason they're so large is the navigating patents. So there's a limit to what they can actually do around compression there. And the company Red, if you hate your file size, and send an angry letter to Red, the camera maker, because they've been aggressively going after people who have compressed RAW, claiming that they own the patent to it. So, for example, Blackmagic, they issued a firmware update which removed the RAW and introduced something called Blackmagic RAW, and it's just there are legal complications that are preventing from getting those files down. But that said, there is a lossy RAW that they do have as part of ProRAW, but apparently, according to the spec, they can only go down to 8-bit if they're using it. So, who knows? Hopefully, they'll do something patent unencumbered in the future.
Yeah, we're not going to get into patent law here on this show, not our areas of expertise at all. So, so large file size. It's probably no surprise then that Apple are kind of bundling storage within some of their packages and other products that they're selling now to let people do that. Is ProRAW turned on? As someone who, as I think I said earlier, Santa hasn't brought me my iPhone 12 quite yet. So is RAW turned on by default, or is it off by default?
No, it's not on by default, and it's not even that. So to kind of like, I want to say that I do not envy the people who have to design the Apple camera app. Apple's camera app has to do everything for everyone, right? So you've got your camera that does panoramas and 4K video and slow-mo and photos in different formats, live photos, night mode photos, et cetera, et cetera. It's a lot of knobs and switches. So for this one, they decided to do something which Apple almost never does. They added a setting. If you go into settings and then go into the camera section of your settings, you can turn on ProRAW, and then if you turn it on, it'll just get a little button in the top right, which is off by default. If you tap it, it'll turn it on, and it'll turn itself off again as well, quite aggressively so. Like maybe if you open your camera again a few seconds later, it'll still be on, but if you leave it alone for a while, it'll turn itself back off. So make sure it stays on. There's actually a setting, another setting to persist setting, so it remembers it in case you really want to keep it on all the time. But Apple definitely realizes that people don't want to shoot RAW all the time. There's a lot of things that you cannot do in ProRAW. Those live photos won't work with ProRAW. You won't be able to take burst photos because taking a ProRAW takes a few seconds of processing. So I won't be able to take photos very quickly. Portrait mode and ProRAW don't play well together. They don't work together. So there's a lot of compromise there still. It's not like ProRAW is this magical, just plugs into camera and does everything the camera already did now in RAW. It does an impressive amount, like Deep Fusion or Smart HDR and even night mode support RAW with ProRAW. But there's also some compromises there.
Yeah, I guess night mode's probably one of those kind of perfect scenarios where RAW is going to add a huge benefit. Some of the extra exposure and some of the recovery that you can do in those situations. But so it sounds like so you have to activate it, then turn it on when you want to use it, rather than. It sounds like they've been very aware that people, one, would soon fill up their storage, but two, also maybe not understand exactly what RAW is doing for them, and what the capabilities are. So they've made it so you have to turn it on deliberately to use it.
And that ties into what Ben said about compatibility. There's still a lot of apps that just don't support RAW. Instagram kind of hastily added ProRAW support last week, which actually just it doesn't actually edit the raw data like in the app. It just no longer throws an error when it tries to open a ProRAW file, because Apple doesn't take a JPEG plus RAW file. It is just a DNG file when you take ProRAW. So if you try to open that image in an app that does not support a RAW image, it will just not work. So they're definitely, I think they're doing the right thing there.
Let's talk about, you've taken your ProRAW image and now you want to process it a little bit. What's your go-to places to edit your ProRAW images these days?
For me, I am super old-fashioned in the way I edit shots. I offload my photos to my Mac and then I edit them in Lightroom Classic. It's just a comfort thing, I guess. I got my presets there and I just sit down and let's go. Take my time, okay, get comfortable, get a drink, just get into the editing mode. I realize most people probably do not edit like this though. Ben, how do you process your shots?
I'm just, I'll just try different apps all the time. On my Mac, I have a Creative Cloud subscription, so I'll use Lightroom. And, as far as feature-rich features like haze removal, noise reduction, not that we're big on destroying noise, but there are so many features there. They just added color grading, so that's really the workhorse if I'm going to be doing extensive editing. But obviously, it's tricky to scale that down to a mobile device. And if I'm on the go and I just want something with light editing, there's Darkroom, there's Raw Power, which was built by an ex-Aperture engineer or Eng manager. And I'm always like, if you tell me that there's a popular photo editing tool, I've used Snapseed, I'm just racking them all up. But it really is what am I trying to accomplish?
Yeah, Snapseed is my go-to editor at the moment. Does it work with ProRAW? Do we know?
I haven't played with it since it came out, actually.
I have to admit that I thought that Snapseed was no longer being actively developed. Is it in because it wasn't the Nick? It was part of the Nick software collection, right? And I don't think Google bought it then, and then they offloaded it. I'm not sure what the story is.
It's been around under many ones. I believe so. Yeah, I believe it's still owned by Google.
So it'll probably go away in a year or two
probably.
For when they get the board. So it's the Snapchat of services where it'll just sort of enjoy it while it's there. So.
Ouch! And I guess once we get invested in it, they'll ask us to start paying for it. That's what Google will do with it.
Actually, I didn't expect to go there, but
well, we went there. Actually, and this may be a great segue to talk about privacy. What a great segue that was. Do you like that?
Nice.
Yeah.
We here at SmugMug and Flickr, we're very, very, very much lean towards making sure that we do the right thing by all our customers. We're not in the business of mining data and selling data. That's just not who we are as people. It's not who we are as a business. And I know, having spoke to you at length, it's something that you focus really hard on with your apps as well as the privacy of your users. Yeah.
Yeah, it's something we really, really enjoy having as like a front and center feature, because we always joke that we'd love for our competitors to copy it. On the design side of things, that's just as nice as being able to present that to people and tell people so that they also create an expectation. App Store just introduced this privacy nutrition label kind of thing, and we were delighted to be able to just put on there that we just don't use any of your data, nothing. Data used to track you, nothing. Data we collect, nothing. Ben can talk about this, but we don't put random tracking libraries in our app because we don't need to look at what people are doing in our app. I don't want to know what people are doing in the settings. Why?
Exactly. I think part of it comes from our general philosophy around product development, where we don't believe in A/B testing 40 shades of blue. You just pick one color and move on. And part of the virtue of having a small team where we don't have the resources that we could put people on, these experiments. We always have to focus on what makes the most impact and what delivers the most value to users. And honestly, like, uh, we don't do paid per click ads. We're probably doing a terrible job compared to these other companies. We just sort of believe, yeah, you deliver a product, and people who are super passionate about what you're doing are going to be your form of advertising. And there's so many ways that a lot of this data can send you down the wrong path, and you can what is it, good Hart's law, any number is good until it becomes a target, right? So if we want to build something and our goal is to get installs, then we'll start doing creepy stuff, or we'll do push notifications. And it's just like, we just want a camera app. We're used to paying for a decent camera, and you just use it. It doesn't send you an alert. It doesn't phone home and tell Sony or Leica what photos you're taking. It's a very simple transaction, and somehow that's revolutionary in tech. It doesn't make any sense. I mean, we're not billionaires, so I guess we're doing this wrong, but. Yeah.
Well, if you asked us, we would say you're doing it right, because it's no surprise that our favorite camera app has the same approach to business and ethics as we do. Bootstrap business, care about our customers' privacy, and we're in the business where we charge people for a product. If they love the product, they pay us for it, and that's the transaction right there. The transaction's not data. And I think that's where we really see a lot of familiarities in what decisions we made back in 2002 to be bootstrapped and grow the business very steadily with a focus on our customers rather than a focus on their data. And we recognize a lot of that in what you're doing at Lux Optics.
That's great.
Thanks.
Yeah, I love that. There's companies out there that really still do that. I mean, there's a lot. I always do complain about companies like Facebook or privacy violations, and I try to be mindful in what businesses I support. But it's really nice to build a business and then just put your money where your mouth is. Quite literally, we don't run ads on Facebook. We, like Ben said, we don't collect your photos. If I want my camera to work that way, like my physical camera, why can't my camera on my phone also work that way? And in that sense, it makes sense if we're on the iPhone too. Apple's business model is not data harvesting your photos. They do all that on device. They don't care about your data. They sold you the iPhone already, so they're good, as far as we know. And that aligns well with us too.
Yeah, very much. I'm conscious that I haven't said hello to people in the chat yet, because we got straight into our conversation. So I'm going to give some people a little shout out here on the chat. Jackson joins us from Tucson in Arizona. Hi, Jackson. Thank you for joining. Bud's joining us from New Mexico. Veronica is a little bit closer to you, Seb. She's in the Netherlands. Mooi, yeah.
Nice.
And Carol says hello from New York City. Connor says hello from Belfast. John, a frequent visitor here, says hello from Dog Pound, best place name in the world. A lot of conversation by Connor about Nick Software and Snapseed and how it was owned by Nick and then Google, and now Nick Software is now owned by DxO and all that type of stuff. So thank you for that conversation there, Connor. GOG said a great comment. I miss the days when cameras just took pictures and phones just made phone calls and sent texts. Well, the good news is, what I've found is the more the phones get better at taking pictures, the worse they get at making phone calls. So really, they are just now cameras that also have a phone in them. And John also says hello from Toronto. Hi, John. So lots of people from all over the world joining us today. What are your hopes, gentlemen, for ProRAW? Where do you think the journey is going to take us? This is literally version 1 of ProRAW we're working with just now. Where do you think it will lead?
Ben, you want to take that?
Sure.
That
I think
means
on the
Sebastiaan doesn't want to take.
No, I'll chime in with my thoughts about it too, but I want to
yeah.
hear Ben's thought first.
I think that honestly, it's like they really stuck the landing. So I'm really happy with what they launched for V1. And it was clear that they were, when they did a launch like a week before App Store Connect shuts down, like they were getting that into the wire. So, shout out to the teams at Apple that probably drank a lot of Red Bull to get this out. But yeah, it's really great. So if I had to look to the future, like I said before, the fact that they can only apply compression to 8-bit images means that sometimes it's fine, but very often if you enable lossy compression in ProRAW, you will see artifacts, especially in the shadows. You will see like this purple, this purple cast. So that's why we decided that we didn't want to enable lossy compression inside Halide right now, because we are certain a lot of people would enable it and been really disappointed about the photos. And if you're going to go 8-bit, you might as well just shoot JPEG. I would love to see, but from talking again, it's like that's actually more of a limitation within the DNG spec. So I hope that they can work, with Adobe and other companies who contribute to come up with a solution next year. That said, I'm perfectly happy as it is now. I think processing time is the only other issue there. As far as it takes a couple seconds. We're actually going to be working on that in the next update to Halide. We were very conservative with the holidays, so there is more of a lag there, but regardless of how you hide the lagginess, it takes about 2.5 seconds to process each photo. So that gives you a limit as far as being able to take a burst. You are not going to be able to take a burst shooting ProRAW.
Yeah.
But aside from that, and I think Sebastiaan, you can talk a little bit about the effects of the noise reduction and the sharpness there.
Yeah, I'm for if you want to dig into it, I've written a lot of articles about RAW on iPhone, and when I looked at this was before ProRAW came out, I pitted the 12 Pro against the 12 Pro Max because they have different size sensors this year, and ostensibly a larger sensor means better signal, less noise. So looking at the RAW files, again, those are a little noisy to normal non-Pro RAW files. You could see that the 12 Pro Max made crisper, more detailed shots when there was no noise reduction applied, because the noise reduction was kind of a little similar between the noise reduction. Let me put it this way. The noise reduction Apple programmed into the standard images kind of worked about the same intensity on both phones, which meant that kind of a detail got a little bit thrown out on the 12 Pro Max. In ProRAW, it's a little bit better, but there's still no fine-grained control to turn noise reduction off. For instance, your ProRAW files will have noise reduction in them. Sometimes that's because a process like Deep Fusion is used, and if you have Deep Fusion, there's multiple images being taken, just like in night mode. And if you merge multiple images, noise is being reduced because you're taking an average of several photos, and that inherently improves signal, reduces noise. But if it's not doing that, I would love a way to kind of turn that off. They're already a little noisier. It's not nearly the same as your normal JPEG photo, but I can still find situations in which I extract quite a much more sharp image shooting the regular RAW files. And I'll echo what Ben said. I would love for us to be able to take RAW files faster. ProRAW files are just very slow to capture, and right now it's obvious that that's because it takes so much effort. This is really that huge, all that stuff they do, that smart stuff, the merging images to make HDR shots, Deep Fusion, night mode, normally works in a split second and has been worked over years and years and years and years at the best and brightest minds of Apple to work in an instant so you can take a quick photo. In ProRAW now, finally, they're able to let that out a little bit and let that process take a bit more time to produce a better quality RAW file over a larger amount of time. And now I'm complaining about the fact that it takes too much time. But it takes a lot of time. And I would like to be able to take them a little faster. I like to shoot a lot of photos.
Yeah. Do you think it's that processing power that it needs, which is why we're not seeing it backward compatible? Typically, Apple will release something and you'll get it for, the previous two versions of the camera. Do you think it's really down to the processing power in the 12 that makes all this possible?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. It's entirely memory. Previously, they were outputting just 8-bit JPEGs, and now that they're going to be they output 12-bit images. Just because of how, I'll spare you all the technical details, but you basically have to double the amount of memory if you're going to be outputting to a higher bit depth, right? And these Pro devices have more memory. I don't know the exact number. I think like 2 GB more. And so, if you require twice the memory, you're gonna, you need a higher device. So I think the real question is, are Apple devices always going to be, are the Pro ones always going to be the ones that have more memory, or are their entire line next year going to see a memory bump? In which case, I would expect ProRAW to be coming to the non-Pro devices, but I don't know. I don't know Apple's hardware pipeline, so.
Yeah, not many of us do. Outside Apple, and I guess there's not everybody inside Apple knows the pipeline either. So, got a great question here from Roger that maybe you can give us some insight. He said, do you want to cover what, if any, changes people should make in the iPhone 12 Pro camera settings to get the most quality, if any? Is there a different way you're approaching the setup of either the camera app or your own app to get the best quality out of that ProRAW file?
So it depends a lot on your workflow. If you are shooting in the normal camera app, and what you're shooting really, if you want the best quality out of shooting action, if you have a child running around and it's playing, your best quality shot is going to be the one that is both in focus and has what is happening in it. In which case you want capture speed, so you want to just be able to shoot bursts. And honestly, nobody can compete with Apple's camera app on that. No app will ever be able to, because they cannot work that close to the metal. If you're trying to get the best quality photo, if you're like, if there's a vast, you're at Machu Picchu, you want to take that once in a lifetime shot, you're taking your time to frame it, to take the photo. Your options are to take RAW or ProRAW, depending on what your needs are. I personally sometimes like to take RAW files because I like that bit of grain they have. They look a bit more like a film photo. ProRAW will have some of that computational look. Depends on what look you're going for. On almost any iPhone, if you are shooting RAW, it pays off to underexpose a little bit. There's a lot of detail in the shadows, and it's harder to recover from the highlights in RAW files. That goes for ProRAW and it goes for regular RAW files. On your 12 Pro and 12 Pro Max, apart from that, not an awful lot of things you can really do. There's small things that apply to a lot of the multi-camera phones that you should be aware of when shooting with a non-pro camera app like Halide. If you're shooting with the normal camera app, a good thing to keep in mind is Apple doesn't always show you which lens you are using. This is your best camera. This is the wide lens, the 26mm, the ultra wide and the telephoto. If you're taking a photo really close up of a mushroom in the forest and you want to get that tight crop, you might think I'm going to use that new 65mm telephoto lens. It's not going to be working. You might think it is, but what it will do if something comes really close to the lens, this thing doesn't really have that great of a minimum focus distance. It will take an image of your wide angle lens and just crop it for you, which means part of the image will just be thrown away. So in that case, be aware of the limitations of all these cameras on your phone. Like, use the wide lens if you want to take something very close by, for instance. That's a good tip for making sure you get the most out of the shot. To kind of know.
Great tip. Great insight there into not necessarily going for the widest lens, but maybe just get a little bit closer with the more standard lens than the super wide, and get more detail. We're at a place in the kind of raw processing and post-production world now where we're seeing more and more pieces of software wanting to do everything for you, right? The rise of AI, and we've seen it with the likes of Skylum, we've seen it with the likes of Adobe with their new products coming to Photoshop and Lightroom, trying to offer a lot of convenience, I guess. But I wonder if you gentlemen like me find that with that comes this kind of loss of control of ultimately being in control of your own destiny, of how your picture looks. So when you mentioned there about not necessarily just relying always on ProRAW, but maybe just taking the standard RAW would be a better solution, because then you can go edit it the way you want to and be in complete control of all the aspects of it. Do you feel a bit like that yourselves?
I think that if you're taking a photo where you don't need to take advantage of the computational stuff like Smart HDR. So if you already know that the photo's in an acceptable dynamic range or even a little outside of it, then you can absolutely get at least equal, if not better results shooting RAW because one, it'll be faster. Unlike 2.5 seconds, it's about 50 milliseconds to shoot a regular RAW. We've gotten it down that fast. So just being able to quickly fire, and if you can take 100 shots, one of them is going to be pretty good. So there's that. But also you don't have to, worry about any of the noise reduction. If you, I guess the answer is if you are an experienced enough photographer that you don't need to lean on the computational features, which they can still help great photographers. But if you know what you're doing, then RAW is going to give you more control, just like driving manual versus driving an automatic transmission, right? So yeah, I'd say that if you know it's a shot in an acceptable dynamic range, then just shoot RAW if you know what you're doing. Sebastiaan, I don't know if you feel different.
Yeah, and it's also just worth shooting RAW just to see what that is. Like, where do the trainings wheels come off? What is all this computational stuff that's being thrown on, and what kind of creative choices is that making for you? Because inherently, cameras getting smarter means that they're going to be taking creative choices for you. Any kind of HDR is subjective because they're trying to approximate the dynamic range of our eyes, which they can't. They have to choose what detail to show in the shadows, what detail to show in the highlights. If you're shooting RAW, you get to make that choice. If you're shooting ProRAW, you get to choose what level of HDR you want, but it's still kind of the HDR that Apple has. And with RAW, it's much more in your own hands. And the same thing goes for color, right? So, and a lot of people think, yes, but we've trained machines to become really good at this because we machine learned them to make photos that look just like real life. But the point of photography is not making your photo look like real life all the time. It's to make photos that you want to make. It's to create images that you want to make. It's an art. And I think that is where that creative choice being made by yourself really starts to shine, because you want to make that image look like the way you saw it, not the way it looked.
Yeah, absolutely. Roger came back with a little follow-up to his question. He says, does changing the formats in camera capture settings from high efficiency to most compatible affect the RAW or ProRAW output in the default camera app? You're shaking your head
that's
there,
just
Ben.
a math. So that's just their way of saying JPEG versus HEIC. So it's just a friendly way of saying that. So it will absolutely not affect the output of RAW. And actually, I don't know if they were referring to Halide or the first-party camera. We kind of copied the same terminology, but that only affects the processed image that comes out of the system.
Yeah, it's a bit like when you have a DSLR and you put these scene settings and stuff on it, or you change the white balance or something. Ultimately, it doesn't affect the RAW file. It's just the JPEG or the processed JPEG that you're seeing either on the screen or outputted. So yeah, RAW, you'll still get that basic information no matter how you have those bits set up. It's a really interesting time. I keep saying that. I feel like for the last 20 years I've said it's a really interesting time to be in photography. And it is. It's always an interesting time to be in the photography industry, but this is definitely going to be an area that I'm excited to see progress. I think, as a version 1 of ProRAW, it's an incredible format already for people who just want that extra bit of support but still want the power of RAW, but the ability to switch to just ordinary RAW when they're in control or want to really control the artistic merits of that scene. But when I'm running around with my kids, and I see a moment that I think is going to be worthy of putting on my wall, then the ability to switch to something like ProRAW and still get an amazing shot, but with some control over it and all the quality that I want. I think it's going to be a killer feature once we really get into the habit of switching between formats. It's a really, as I say, really exciting time, and I guess for you building a camera app, it's going to be really interesting few years moving forward.
Yeah, this is the craziest time to honestly be building something like a camera app. I remember when we first released Halide, and I mean, I had friends tell me, why would you make a camera app now? There's so many camera apps and photo apps out there already. Or isn't it too late? And I thought, well, it's only about to get interesting. And especially now it's an admission from Apple that the iPhone is a camera. It has its own RAW format now. Like it really is starting to become more of a tool that you can use for proper photography. And we've been saying this for a long time. It's like, oh, your phone can now replace your camera. But like, really, we use kind of cherry-picked examples, and we say it's kind of good enough, and then it's not quite good enough in dark, or it's not quite good enough in this. And, I love using quote unquote real cameras. I like calling them, my friend America calls them big cameras, right? Like, they're not phones, big cameras. Phones are still not there. And we have a really exciting time ahead where that gap gets smaller and smaller. Phones are getting better at being cameras than cameras are getting better at being smart or being portable, etc. And that's the cool thing. And to be in that space right now, to be building an app that is basically the camera on that device, is just super cool. And there's a lot coming that we can't even envision yet with all the data that these sensors are capturing.
Yeah, looking forward to it. For those of you who have joined us today, just a couple of things. Please hit that subscribe button to the channel here. Hit the little bell notification. That way you'll be notified whenever we release another episode of the show. As I mentioned at the top of the show, this is the last one of 2020. We've finally got to the end of the year. We will be back in 2021 with some incredible guests and some incredible shows to give you here on SmugMug Live. Before I say goodbye to our guest today, can I just ask you all to have a super safe holiday season? Look after each other, be kind, stay safe, be smart, and we look forward to seeing you back here in 2021 for some incredible shows. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. I know everybody has really enjoyed the conversation about ProRAW and getting a little insight if they weren't familiar with your camera app Halide. I would highly recommend everybody go checks it out. They'll find it on the Apple Store. And thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Sebastiaan, especially after a long haul flight, hopefully you can go get some rest now and get over your jet lag.
No, you're helping me. I'm staying awake. This is great.
Ben, thank you so much for your insight, and congratulations again on the release and all the great articles you've written over the last few weeks. And hopefully we can catch up again in the new year and have another conversation about photography. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks. It was a lot of fun.
Cool.
Yeah,
okay, everybody. Yeah. We'll see you on the next one. Have a great holiday. Have the most wonderful and happy new year wherever you are in the world. And we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody. Bye.